Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce, Ukraine War News Update. First part thereof, if you discount my Syria update, first part thereof for the 30th of November 2024. Lots to talk about, as there always is, and a little bit of a further Syria update. We're going to start with the Ukrainian general staff figures, as we normally do, for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. Some huge numbers being posted, particularly in terms of the personnel loss, 1,740. That is a very high number. Amongst the previous kind of records, it's sort of 1,740, I think 1,780 one day. But then yesterday we had 2,030. But anyway, this number is just a phenomenally high number, just insane. Tanks, 5 tanks lost. That's below the daily average. 12 troop-carrying AFVs, 23 artillery systems. So artillery systems just a snip above the daily average, but those other two just below. 2 multiple launch rocket systems, 72 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So that is that for those categories. I think that it's a pretty challenging day for the Russians. Obviously, a lot going wrong for them in terms of personnel losses. Some were saying that they've been given a real bloody nose in the Chasiv Yar area where they've been attacking and losing large numbers of personnel. So it could be that that's what's largely underwriting their losses. But I haven't seen any confirmation of that. Now, Andrew Perpetua's loss lists for yesterday are pretty substantial for the Russians. That's about a 4-to-1 loss ratio of Russian to Ukrainian losses. But when it comes to combat asset losses, it's just a snip above the Ukrainians. Most of their losses are in terms of civilian vehicles. But then again, they are using those vehicles largely as combat asset pieces. They're attacking with them. And so, yeah, as we discussed before, you could get away with saying actually some of those are combat asset losses. Nonetheless, we'll look at the Ukrainian losses and we'll see that there are a couple of tanks, a couple of BMPs on there, a damaged Bradley, a few APCs, a few MRAPs. Nothing too significant here, massive there. British provided one being damaged. The damage to destroyed ratio is all right, broadly about sort of 50-50. Civilian vehicles, not a crazy amount of them, but yeah, some of the, just under half of those destroyed. Nothing too bad for the Ukrainians. The Russians, on the other hand, have quite a considerable loss list here. If I can get that loss list back, it's gone walkabouts. So the list here starts with an air defense system, a Buk M3, and in fact, I think we got the video of that. We've also got a Zoopark 1 radar. You can't Zoopark there, as someone says. Radar system that has been taken out. We also have an engineering vehicle and a few pieces of artillery, a couple of tanks. Nothing too great there. A few IFVs, about half a dozen of them, most of them destroyed. BTRs and BMPs, and then a few APCs and a single MRAP. A number of trucks, not too significant a list. A few ATVs, all quads there. And then just a vast number of civilian vehicles, loads, cars, motorcycles, flatbed trucks, all those kinds of vehicles. Just a large number of those taken out. I wonder if this tells us something about the Russian ability to throw in proper combat assets against the Ukrainians. Are they struggling to get the infantry fighting vehicles and tanks to the number that they need? I know we keep saying that, but today was just a huge loss of civilian vehicles. Or is it just that there's a couple of montages that have dropped that just so happen to show a load of those types of vehicles that haven't been added to the lists previously? Okay. In terms of personnel, in the Donetsk region, Deputy Commander of the 9th Assault Brigade of the 51st Army of the Russian Federation, Colonel Alexander Lebedev, was eliminated. So there's another senior officer who has fallen by the wayside for the Russians there. Media has identified nearly 81,000 Russian soldiers killed in Ukraine. So this is Media Zona and BBC Russia's benchmark minimum, where they go through the social media announcements of deaths that are 100% connected to the war, and that includes sort of obituaries and all sorts of different ways of confirming that people have been killed. But it's quite a strict criteria that they apply, so that this is going to be a very conservative estimate. But it's interesting that conservative estimate falls slap in the middle of the Ukrainian range that The Economist suggested the other day, so 60 to 100,000. And we know that absolutely minimum number of Russian soldiers killed is 81,000. Much more likely sort of double that. Or this doesn't include DPR, LPR troops, and there'll be vast numbers of those to throw into the mix as well. And then it won't include foreign mercenaries. It won't include lots of different sets of people, arguably, and so that's why I say it's a real benchmark minimum. But 81,000, that is really. I was going to say it's crept up. I think it's gathered a bit of momentum, that number, and I was quite surprised to see that it's 81,000 now. Last time I looked, I thought it's like 50 something thousand. So I think that's pretty significant. Right, what else is there to note? Right, Tim White talks about how in this video showing a page of the 810th Marine Brigade, the Sevastopol Marine Naval Infantry Brigade. These are the guys that have they took a bit of a tonking in Kherson area when the Russians were trying to dislodge the Ukrainians at Krinky, and they got absolutely hammered there. Then they went up to Kursk region. They had a little bit of success, I think, initially, and then they've just been absolutely tonked. So looking through their website on, I don't know, this is what social media page this is, but every post asks for help finding or reports missing Marines from the brigade. Just one brigade in 1 month. The guys Moscow refuses to admit are dead. It is somewhat anecdotal, but these are data points of, I think they reflect the just huge losses that this particular unit are taking, but the Russians in general. Now, on the other hand, more than 100,000 soldiers have been charged under Ukraine's desertion laws. 100,000. Since Russia invaded in February 2022, according to the country's General Prosecutor's Office. Now, some of those have gone back, by the way. It's not like that is they've lost 100,000, but and that is since the beginning of the war, but that is pretty significant. I thought I had another source on that as well, talking about how actually some of them have gone back. So that's not. But it's still a huge issue. Desertion is becoming a topic that's been talked about more and more with regard to the Ukrainians. So, of course, we know that that's an issue for the Russians, but some of these phenomena are not constrained only to the Russian forces. Both of these sides are going through a horrific war where death is a really significant probability, and that's going to affect your psyche. There will be desertions on both sides for sure. Now, the Ukrainian military and analysts write that the Ukrainians struck an S-400 in Crimea. I showed you that image from yesterday. It was 2 nights ago that they struck the S-400 there, but there are more and more people talking about how that was an S-400. Looks like some Russian air defense systems just exploded in Crimea, Simferopolsky district. Rocket fuel detonation, typical pattern observed after air defense systems are destroyed. So it does look like that happened. Then there's this piece in RBC Ukraine talking about ATACMS missile destroying a key 64N6 radar, weakening Russia's air defense. According to the news agency, the radar was most likely destroyed using ATACMS missiles provided to Ukraine by the US. This is in the Kursk region. Their use and destruction of the radar dealt a significant blow to the combat capability of Russia's air defense system. The loss of a critical element like the Nadgobria radar reduces Russia's ability to detect and neutralize aerial threats at long distances. So it can operate to a 300 to 400 kilometer range. And can track up to 200 targets at any one time. Operational altitude from a few meters to 40 to 50 kilometers. That's a really useful bit of kit to have been taken out in the Kursk region. Pretty high value as well there. Although we talk about monetary value to replace these, and one is unsure whether the Russians can actually replace them anyway at this point in the war with sanctions. Evidence. Okay, Ukraine, as I've mentioned previously as well, may have struck a Russian warship, the Ivan Gren. We're still waiting for definite confirmation of this, but there are people talking about this in Tuapse. Smoke in the port of Tuapse after explosions was what was originally reported in the media. Said a ship may have been hit. 135 meter long ship could have been that large landing ship, Ivan Gren. And yeah, we'll await further information on that. Now, this is the book M3. It's quite an incredible bit of footage, this, of it is sped up slightly. And I won't show it to you in case I get in trouble. But this has a drone dropping 2 IEDs on it. And eventually the people getting out and running away, which is probably why it's listed on Andrews as abandoned. But it is severely damaged on 2 sides of it. The IEDs going off. It's quite brilliant that they can hit this moving target. So it's moving, although it's sped up, might be quite a clip. And they're still able to hit that moving target by dropping drones. They're pretty good at doing that. So that air defense system seems to be taken out. Now, so-called Belgorod territorial defense shot down a Russian drone worth $90,000, mistaking it for a Ukrainian one. Pro-Russian military bloggers initially proudly reported the downing of an enemy drone, but later deleted their posts. Ouch. Because not for the first time, they report themselves blowing up a drone and claiming it's Ukrainian, then being pointed out that it's actually Russian. Now, a highway in Kursk Oblast has turned into a shooting range by the Ukrainians' 225th. I'm just going to show you the badge of theirs I have. 225th Separate Assault Battalion. Everywhere, destroyed Russian equipment and personnel can be seen. So that's you can go and check that out. The link will be in the description below. You can go and check out all the destroyed equipment there. Some of these areas in Kursk, there are just it's like equipment graveyard. Now, in the Rilsk region in Kursk, this is behind the Russian lines. Their partisans have committed arson, and as a result of that sabotage, a car full of drones was destroyed. Good news for the Ukrainians there, especially as that's activity only just behind the contact line, really. Rilsk isn't too far from what's going on in the Kursk region. I must do my mapping update today if I get a chance. Right, going on to distant strikes, and we can see that the Ukrainians only had to face 10 drones. It's one of the lowest number of drones that we've seen in the last month. They took 8 out of 10, and that's 80% interception rate. Actually, sometimes we see this where the fewer the drones, it's easier to get anomalies. So it's easier to get a bad day at the office in terms of interception rate. So 80% is actually much less than we have seen recently. But it only takes 2 drones to get through, and then it screws your percentages because so few drones were sent across last night. Anyway, moving on, lights went out in a part of occupied Berdyansk yesterday night. So that is on the occupied coast of Zaporizhia, maybe even going into, no, I don't think it's Donetsk. So you've got Berdyansk and Mariupol, and it goes into Russia, Taganrog and Rostov-on-Don. So Russia says a drone was shot down in the sky before the power failure, yet there were no air alarms or air defences evidence, so the truth may not yet have emerged. Then we are hearing in Crimea this morning, reliable Crimea Wind Telegram channel reports gunshots all over the south coast on the occupied peninsula. So there could be air defence operating there, but no details yet. It was reported early this morning that the Kaspiysk area of Dagestan was attacked by drones. Head of the Southern Republic in Russia spoke about the attempts to damage objects, but there were no casualties. Some have blamed internal disputes, others suspect Ukraine. Who knows what's going on there? But the point is that there may well have been drones flying around into Russia or occupied Ukraine, and we just don't have too many details about them. Now, a new video shows the Atlas oil depot in Kamensky in Rostov region continuing to burn. This is the oil depot that was hit, was it 2 nights ago? May have even been 3 nights ago now. This had been previously hit 3 months prior to that. Now, I've seen several reports on it today. One saying, oh, where's it gone? That's all in the wrong area. That's why I didn't share them in my video earlier. Anyway, there are reports that it's still burning today. Tim White was reporting that it's still burning today, but I've seen another report that they've actually extinguished it. Yeah, there we have Tim saying, following yesterday's drone attack by Ukrainian Rostov region, the Atlas oil depot continues to burn, despite the fact that Russia says no damage was caused. But I have seen a report, I think a no report, saying it's been extinguished. Now, I mentioned this the other day. In fact, I mentioned this previously. Someone was saying your crystal ball ended up being correct, which is I wouldn't fly small planes around the skies of Russia at all, like either not commercially or kind of hobby planes or whatever, especially around oil refineries that are kind of restricted, because you are going to be shot at by your own air defense. There are going to be some trigger-happy Russians out there, and lo and behold, this AN2, as I talked about the other night, came under fire from Russian air defense. So it was an AN2. So I talked about this saying, God, it seems unlikely. So there's an explosion nearby. By the looks of it, it looks like some part of it's on fire, and you've got this plane flying ahead. Surely that's a drone and not actually an AN2. Turns out it was an AN2, civilian Russian AN2 that came under fire from Russian air defense while flying over an oil refinery in Bashkortostan. Attached post, so those are the videos of it doing so. The oil pirate miraculously survived. The bullets even passed through his clothes. Absolutely incredible. He talks about, you can see bullet holes in his clothes, in his plane. He managed to survive, and the plane lives to fight another day. But what insanity to fly over such a dangerous area. Right, anyway, moving on, and we're just going to go quickly to Syria again. I've done that video introducing Syria a little bit, just giving a bit of contextual information about Syria. Aleppo seems to have fallen to the rebels. Now, this is what I'm hearing all around from the Syrians I know, says Thomas van Linger. There is no love lost on Jalani or the HTS. So these are the rebels who are at the moment surrounding or have taken Aleppo, the kind of white area of this map. This pinkish area is the government-controlled area. That's Assad. Then you've got one rebel set of people down there, I think supported by the Americans. You've got the Kurds supported by the Americans over here. You've got the Turks who don't get on with the Kurds over here with supporting other rebel forces. And then I think you've got possibly these black areas like ISIS enclaves as well. So all sorts of people fighting against Assad, and not everyone is particularly nice. And this is what this post is mentioning, that actually there's no love lost between regular Syrians. I mean, okay, anecdote, etc., but from what I'm hearing from the Syrians that I'm talking to, says this guy, there's no love lost between these people and Khalani and HTS. But to the vast majority of the Syrian people, Assad is a bigger evil by a long shot. So it's like, yeah, I don't really like some of these rebels. And all that, not all the rebels are the same. There's some vastly different rebels. Kurds compared to the ISIS, compared to HTS, it's just very different. But what appears to be the case is everyone hates Assad. This was in response to someone who had said nobody wants HTS Jalani or any religious fanatics to govern an inch of Syria, but that's just how bad Syrians want Assad gone. A lesson for all of those who decided that Syrians and their aspirations can simply be ignored. It is a complex, really complex situation there. Now, this map, okay, let's just remind you, this is Syria on the edge of the Mediterranean. You've got the Russians in control of Tartus, this port on the Mediterranean Sea there. You've got Aleppo that's fallen. You've got this Idlib area just over here. And then you've got a town called Hama to the south of there. So this is the kind of control map. There are people now talking about how Hama might well fall soon, and it is indeed vulnerable. And that's just incredible, considering Aleppo. No one was thinking Aleppo would fall. It's been so sudden. Anyway, to go back to my sources, rebels have captured the villages of Kafir, Zira, Marek, and Latmana from the Assad regime in northern Hama. So they're going down towards that Hama city. Indeed, Neil Hoyer says after taking Aleppo, there is a very real possibility now that the Syrian rebels will push to the city of Hama, a sentence that would have sounded absolutely insane 10 years ago, let alone 1 week ago. Khan Sheikhoun and Marek are two key garrison towns for the Assad regime forces north of Hama city. Both have fallen in recent hours as regime troops are in full rout. Rebels could breach Hama city within 24 hours at this rate. Literally in the 5 minutes since this post, Latmane, the next major town south towards Hama, has fallen to rebels. The speed of the advance is crazy. And that's what's pretty incredible about this, is that these maps are just out of date as soon as they're created. And in fact, you probably got white area all the way down to there, and around Aleppo, all sorts happening as you've got movements to the east along this front line there, and you've also got movements to the south from some of these other rebel held areas to the north there. So yeah. Shashank Joshi says, Aleppo, quote, Iran is worried and is trying to bring its agents into the battle and compensate for its losses with Hezbollah. So just to remind you that Hezbollah in Lebanon are backed by Iran. Iran's over here. So Iran is a supporter of the Assad regime. Russia is a supporter of the Assad regime. Hezbollah is a supporter. And we have this whole mix of like international ne'er-do-wells who are supporting the Assad regime. But you also have a very eclectic mix of rebels that are supported themselves by Western forces like the US and like Turkey. And Turkey are pitted against Russia, and that's an interesting situation considering Turkey takes so much money from Russia, still does trade with it, and is kind of straddling the fence with regard to Ukraine and Russia. But yeah, pretty amazing situation there. Oh, I forgot to mention that earlier. That should have been in the strikes that actually F-16s were up in the air the other night against Russian cruise missiles. Even though the weather was supposed to be bad, they did have some effect, the F-16, so they are still carrying out their air defense duties. Anyway, back to Syria. So breaking news, Aleppo has been hit by massive Russian airstrikes. So what the Russians have done since is to... sorry, there's some pretty bad video footage coming out from there. So Aleppo has been absolutely hammered by the Russian Air Force. They have also been bombing areas of Idlib. Let me just sort something out. Yeah, so videos have emerged of the aftermath of the Russian airstrikes in Aleppo. It seems like Russia's back to the tactic of indiscriminate bombing of civilians in Syria. And yeah, it is not looking good there as far as what the Russians are doing, but it's kind of all they can do these days, which is just they are torn between Ukraine and Syria, and while their air force is still fairly active in Syria, I guess all they can do is just drop bombs on arguably anyone, civilians and rebels alike. Syrian government forces announced a retreat from Aleppo to prepare for a counteroffensive, according to Russian media. Reportedly, the Syrian Arab Army, so they are the Assad regime armed forces, released a statement about a temporary withdrawal of troops in order to regroup ahead of reinforcements arriving to initiate a counterattack. The Syrian military also reported that dozens of servicemen were killed in a rebel attack in the northwest of the country. They also confirmed that the rebels had managed to infiltrate most of the city of Aleppo. This is the first confirmation from Assad's forces about the surprise rebel attack on Aleppo since it began on the 27th. The amount of captured Assad regime weapons, ammunition, tanks and IFVs and trucks is sufficient to rearm an entire rebel army, says Caucasus War Report. For example, the rebels have captured multiple launch rocket systems, including Grads, self-propelled artillery such as the Grodzvika and 130mm towed guns, M46s, old ones, T-72 tanks, and more in southern front lines of Idlib. This will allow the rebel factions to fully rearm themselves now with more advanced weapons since the beginning of the Syrian civil war. In addition to dozens of military hardware already captured, the rebels have seized a ZSU-23 Shilka self-propelled anti-aircraft gun. In fact, I just saw some Ukrainians using them and blowing up a Shahid with one of them. This could come in handy against low-flying bomber aircraft, so on and so forth. So lots of kit being captured. Now, this news piece saying Russia fails to halt Aleppo offensive with warplanes diverted to Ukraine. Syrian rebels have seized large swathes of territory in the north while Moscow is busy with another war. So it's the second front that's opened up. So now Russia can't handle the Aleppo offensive because its air power is tied up in Ukraine. Is this what they call a second front, says Maria Avdiva. Yeah, it's not going to help Ukraine at all, or it is going to help Ukraine. It's not going to help the Russian offensive in Ukraine. What is going on in Syria? This is definitely an issue for the Russians. Now, A Russian general, moving on, has been charged in absentia for ordering a missile strike on Chernihiv theatre in 2023. You remember the theatre that had children written in white on the paving slabs outside the theatre, and they still bombed it, and the people were cowering in the basement there, and many people died. It's pretty horrific. Security Service of Ukraine charged Russian Colonel General Yevgeny Nikiforov in absentia for ordering a missile strike on the Chernihiv theatre that killed 7 people and wounded 200 in August 2023. That wasn't in Chernihiv, I believe. That was in Mariupol. But I could be wrong, unless that's a different theatre and another very similar attack. Okay, in Donetsk, Pokrovsk and Kharkiv directions, units will be reinforced with reserves. So that's going to be music to many people's ears, as Syrsky has announced reserves. Also talk of additional reinforcement with ammunition, weapons and military equipment. Now, Zelensky's appointed Major General Mikhailo Drapachy as commander of Ukraine's ground forces. This is good news, says Tataragami. He's known for his organizational skills, shown most recently when he stopped a Russian offensive in the Kharkiv direction after being assigned there following a breakthrough. So Tim White also says Ukraine today appointed Drapachy as the new commander of the ground forces. He has a rank of brigadier general and is promoted from deputy chief of the general staff, and has led the Luhansk unit well in Toretsk recently from a seemingly impossible situation. Mikhailo Drapachy, the new ground forces commander, helped liberate Kherson a while back in 2014. He was responsible for this iconic moment as Ukraine defended Mariupol from Russia's advances. Today's news has gone down very well with the troops. So that's good for Ukraine. Some changes of personnel. Another awesome start decision, says Ilya Ponomarenko, is the promotion of Colonel Oleg Apostol, the heroic leader of the elite 95th Airborne, to the deputy commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The key to our future is in the hands of a new generation of post-2014 battle-hardened military leaders. So some pretty popular moves being made there. Now, onto the economy. The ruble doesn't find support. It entered into a free fall. Now Russia has stopped trading. This means that the exchange rate will just seem to have stabilized. That's not the case. The ruble has become a black market only currency. What is a free fall? And just to give you an idea, so here Tim White says, speaking of the economy, you may wonder what's happened to the ruble after this week's collapse. In short, interventions from Russia's central bank and currency restrictions calmed the situation. The dollar rate fell from 114 to 106. However, I expect more pressure in the coming week. Well, actually, this is pretty much fake, because they've taken the ruble off the foreign exchange markets. And so, yeah, this is not the real rate anymore. And I think this is what we're going to see in this thread here. So it means the value goes down and nothing stabilizes it, nothing moves it up. It means the ruble is not supported anymore, not by foreign buyers who need rubles to buy Russian exports, and not by short-term measures of the Russian central bank. The Russian central bank buying rubles with dollars. Bank President Nabiullina doesn't anymore. Maybe the coffers are empty. Maybe she's just decided that throwing good money after a collapsing ruble makes no sense. So what did they do? Nabiullina is highly regarded in the West as a central banker who knows what she's doing. She could keep up appearances of a Russian economy doing fine, even if everyone knew this was impossible. But the means for her to do so are being exhausted increasingly rapidly. Russia stopped free trading of the ruble on the exchange. It means the ruble is now predominantly a black market currency. The exchange rate remains sort of frozen, but but most people can't sell rubles there anymore. Do you want dollars or euros? Black market is your go-to. We are looking at the monetary collapse of Russia. Russians brought their money to Cyprus, but the golden passports have been withdrawn. Interesting that Cyprus has just kicked a bunch of people out, many of which are Russian citizens, or revoked their citizenship. Or Almaty in Kazakhstan, or Turkey, where Russians are now the predominant buyers of real estate, not even the Turkish people themselves. So if you spend, something like $400,000 on real estate in Turkey, you get given Turkish citizenship. So there's a lot of Russian money going there. The Russian economy, including the ruble, is collapsing. Capital flight. The oligarchs had long since fled. Now the middle class follows suit. Collapse. So that is someone giving their opinion, René Duba, on the Russian ruble and the Russian economy. Now, there was talk yesterday, Jason J. Smart here saying, quoting, national Nationally, the Russian internet has collapsed. Banks, delivery services and telecom operators are not working. The Russian government probably did this to prevent panic from spreading so that people do not take out their bank deposits. So possibly a way of controlling a rush on the banks, stopping a rush on the banks and people withdrawing money. But it looks like there was internet issues right across the financial sector yesterday. Now, next, the reports that 1,000 shopping malls in Russia are on the verge of a bankruptcy. The crisis stems from regular and sharp increases in the key interest rate from the central bank, as revealed by the vice president of the Union of Shopping Centres. According to Liulin, the recent hike in the key interest rate has led many banks to inform mall owners that the cost of their existing loans will soon rise significantly. On top of that, landlords are exiting the market en masse and tax burdens are increasing. It's worth noting that in October, the central bank raised the key interest rate to a record 21%, the highest in the last 20 years, citing high inflation. The central bank has also stated it plans to raise the key rate again in the near future. So we have seen shopping malls burn, like it's one of the key Russia on fire incidents we have seen over the course of the war. I wonder if we'll see that more and more, given that 1,000 of them are possibly on the verge of going bankrupt. Yeah, and then there have been some pretty horrific scenes of, not nice scenes anyway, of Russian riot police going into a bunch of clubs in Moscow. Mainly, I think at least some of them are gay clubs. I don't know that they all are. But anyway, last night, Tim White says, I reported on and showed some footage of Russia's raids on nightclubs in Moscow. Now police bodycam footage has been released of the attack on the Inferno club, where they happily beat people even if they cooperated. The fascists admit it's a clampdown on LGBT+. So we have seen that they have made I guess, not the advertising, the kind of public acceptance of sexual freedoms as being tantamount to extremist terrorism. And so they've outlawed it. And now they appear to be going around certain clubs in Moscow and being really heavy-handed with people. And this is just another example of autocracy, of dictatorship, where that he wants complete conformity from the population, and there's no kind of it's the idea that this is sexual decadence, that's an infection from the West type thing, and of course that's not going to play well with the liberals in that society, but also it's just like the morale of society is going to be surely shocking at the moment, and this will just add to people being unhappy, to there being a great unease in society. And the more you constrict society, possibly the more it might explode at some point. And I wonder, when you put all this together with a collapsing economy, people coming back home in body bags in large numbers, I wonder whether Russia is in for a very rocky next 6 months. Anyway, there you go. That's enough from me. Just thank you for permitting me, I guess, to be a little bit unscheduled in my output the next 24 hours. Actually, the next week is going to be a bit funky because there's a little new one in the house. There's my partner. It's not our baby, but my partner, Helen, her daughter has had a little baby. And that's why I was at the hospital at 3:30 last night. And my brain is a bit destroyed at the moment. Just got back from my boys' football match. And so just lovely, healthy little baby girl. And so it's going to be a bit of a funky next few weeks, I should say. So bear with me. I'll still try and get out the usual content, but it might be at different times and it might be a little shorter. You'll probably like that. I can't speak for short amounts of time, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.